Ladies and gentlemen, we're live. We're back. It is the post-game brew. We're here. Bad result for my Bears, but that's okay. I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, special guest. Rub it in. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of the North Pole, Gabe Flaten, is here. It's your time, buddy. Go ahead, gloat.
Well, Andy, I would never want to do that. If anybody watched the game, there's nothing to brag about. Let's be honest. I think we can find common ground that both of these teams are not very good, but the Vikings, I will give them credit, where the Bears, nothing went right on them on the offensive end. Everybody says with Minnesota, if Dalvin Cook doesn't do anything, Kirk Cousins can't win them the game. Kirk Cousins can't win in prime time. Look what happened. Kirk Cousins did what he had to do. He made key throws. Really did not make any really bad throws. That one interception wasn't his fault. Whereas Foles, the numbers don't lie with him. He had a bad game, and the two offensive lines, Minnesota has been awful this year, but in pass protection against Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, they didn't do much on the pass rushing end. So I love what I saw out of Minnesota. Would have loved to see some more points on the board, but it's the Bears defense. We'll take what we can get. A win is a win.
Absolutely. A win is a win for sure. Not a pretty one by any means. You guys definitely looked like the better team throughout the whole game. Let's get our initial reaction. I guess you just gave me your initial reaction. So you talked about Foles and how much he struggled in this game, injured on the final drive. We see Tyler Bray have to step into a game in an absolutely impossible spot. If you look at Foles' numbers, 15 for 26, 106 yards, averaging 4.1 yards per attempt. I don't believe that was one touchdown. That means I meant one interception there. Definitely not one touchdown. You said it. What's your initial takeaway from Foles here? Not impressive at all as a Bears fan.
No, and we look at last week's game against Tennessee, Andy. 2 for 15 on third down conversions in that game for Nick Foles. And on those 15 third down conversions, 14 of them were pass attempts. So he isn't great on third down, extending the drive. You watch the second half in this game. What was it? 4 3 and outs. Their time of possession was minuscule in the second half. And the Vikings weren't lighting it up on the offensive end, but they were at least piecing together a good amount of first downs as I look for how many first downs they had in total in this game in the team stats box score. It looks like first downs, Minnesota had 19 in this game, Chicago just 10. And last week, the Titans won the game with 228 yards and 11 first downs. I said on my show, there's a team that wins like that, and it's actually the Bears. They're used to winning with under 300 yards and 11 first downs. They could have won a game with 10 first downs, and that's crazy to me.
Yeah, that's just you bring up the second half, the numbers in the second half. The Bears 16 total yards, maybe got a little bit farther than that after that Ryan Nall catch at the end of the game. 1 first down in the second half. The Vikings about 215 yards in the second half and 9 first downs. Just not sustainable. We saw the Bears do a pretty damn good job against Dalvin Cook in the first half. They really committed to stopping the run. And I can't tell you that I was impressed by Dalvin Cook in this game, Gabe. 30 attempts for 96 yards. 3.2 yards per carry. They really committed to having Kirk Cousins beat them. And, Kirk Cousins beat us tonight.
Yeah. Well, he got everybody involved. I saw Chad Beebe make some nice catches. Kyle Rudolph, Justin Jefferson with 8 catches. I love Justin Jefferson because when you throw towards Justin Jefferson, he makes the catch. There was a great play he made that was underappreciated when on that slant pattern where Jalen Johnson fell in this game, and Justin Jefferson, full extension, making the play and almost turning it into a bigger run, but he doesn't drop the ball. So you have our slot guy in Justin Jefferson, very sure-handed, and then you have your slot guy, no offense to the Bears, but Anthony Miller, two catches on 7 targets. And you could say most of those missed catches were on him. He's not doing Nick Foles any favors, that's for sure.
No, I listen, before the season started, I was a huge Anthony Miller guy. I thought he was going to be essential for this team to start big, take a step, be a part of this offense. And it's just not happening. There's too many drops. Talk about the pass deflected off his hands that turns into an interception. You talk about the play on 4th and 9 in the fourth quarter where he drops the ball that puts the Bears on the 3-yard line. A couple listener comments. Brutal injury for Foles. Who starts next week? Thank you, Tom Scavetta, for checking in. And then Grant Baker, hashtag let us pray. We really are going to need to pray if Tyler Bray is getting the start next week. I hope for Trubisky. Trubisky out for the second week in a row with a shoulder injury. Fans been kind of clamoring for him to come back for a couple weeks. I know, Gabe, you and I have talked personally about the thoughts on the quarterback situation in Chicago. And I think it's time. We got to bring Trubisky back. And I know I'm going to sound like an idiot as I was so sold on Foles after his first game. And I think a lot of Bears fans were. But as this season's gone on, he's either not getting the playbook or he's just not a fit in this system.
No, we saw it tonight. I mean, when the play breaks down, he's limited in what he can do. Whereas Trubisky, when that play breaks down, he can at least turn that play into some yardage with his feet and extend the play. The pocket was collapsing on him with or without the blitz in this game. And Minnesota has not gotten to quarterbacks this year without the blitz. This week, it was a little different. It was an easier offensive line. Trubisky could probably do more with a bad offensive line than Foles can. And the problem with the Bears is I know you keep going to the offensive line, but at the end of the day, what are you doing when there is a clean pocket?
Right.
And Nick Foles still isn't making the throw when the pocket is clean. So I hate to see him get hurt, but if the Bears really want to turn this season around and make a difference at that position, they were going to need to go back to Trubisky, I think.
Listener comment here, Nick Beatty, I think it's 70% O-line. That offensive line is terrible. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Another one, when you have a JV offensive line, you need a mobile QB. It's that simple. Absolutely. Nick Foles is not capable of getting out of the pocket. We saw him multiple times tonight get sucked up by I'm going to say it, not a team that came into this game not very known for their pass rush prowess, not very known for getting to the quarterback.
I will interrupt you, Andy. PFF has them rated the 3rd worst pass rush in the NFL.
Like what? The Bears are the best team at making other teams with lackluster defenses look good. We saw it last week against the Titans, and you see it tonight again versus the Vikings. I talked with Caitlin before the game that Foles is going to have to attack this secondary, going to have to attack this weak pass defense, and Foles comes away with 105 yards. What are you? I know maybe you point to Montgomery not being there, not being able to establish a running game, but if we dive into the first half of this game, get our first half reactions, I was impressed with Cordell Patterson. They were moving the ball with him, not only with the run game. They found him a couple times with the pass out of the backfield. He was able to make a couple plays happen. Talk to me a little bit about this first half, kind of what your thoughts were. Vikings go into halftime up 7-6.
Well, they looked good in the first half, minus that the 2 turnovers that really killed them. But I think what everybody thought going into the half was that the Bears, they got the ball first and they would do something in the second half. I think Minnesota, the first half, I mean, they haven't been great in any quarter, particularly this year. That was pretty much what I expected from them in the first half, getting a feel for the defense. But in the second half, I think Dalvin Cook eventually wore down that defense. Whereas in the first half, with that defense really in shape and with energy, Dalvin Cook not getting much going, and Kirk Cousins ultimately carrying the torch to victory in this one. That Rudolph fumble too, his first career fumble in his career. And that really set me the wrong way. That was actually the first play I watched. I thought the game started at 8:20. Apparently, they're starting Monday Night Football games earlier than 8:20 these days. I didn't know that. 8:20 Eastern time where I am. But when I logged in at 8:22 or whatever, I saw Rudolph fumble.
Yeah, I think they're moving up to be 7:15 for me, 8:15 for you. I moved that a little bit up, but they get that fumble. The Bears have momentum. The defense was playing really well. Cook was not getting anything in that first half, folks, but Cousins had so much time in the pocket, especially on those play action throws. The Vikings were so good at attacking the middle of the field. He was finding receivers everywhere across the middle. You talk about BB, you talk about Thielen. He found Rudolph a few times. Jefferson was more so hitting him on out routes on the sideline, but still, he was effective, especially in the play action. You got to talk about Thielen's incredible one-handed catch for the first score of the game. And then, after that fumble you're talking about, the Bears are on the field for 2 plays, and Foles throws the interceptions. It takes the Vikings 6 plays to score. Couple runs for Cook where he doesn't really go anywhere, so you're not feeling too bad about it. But then it takes a throw to BB, a throw to Jefferson, and the touchdown throw to Thielen, and they're on the board. So if you go into halftime, the Vikings leading 7-6. Cousins at the half, 14 for 16, 132 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. He was 13 for 15, I believe, before that interception that Mack ended up coming up with. That you said earlier was not his fault, which is true. It bounces off Thielen's hands, a ball that Thielen probably should have came up with. What were your kind of thoughts about Cousins going into halftime?
Well, the game plan clearly wasn't working. And when the game plan doesn't work, I mean, we saw it in week 2 versus Indianapolis, where the game plan is get Cook the ball, and Dalvin Cook couldn't do that in that game. And then Kirk Cousins failed. He had 3 interceptions, 2 or 3 in that game. And every game this year where Dalvin Cook has struggled, Kirk Cousins has struggled as well. So in this kind of game, I think what happened was that the Vikings kept pushing Dalvin Cook. In the first 2 weeks of the season where Dalvin Cook struggled a lot, he only had a little over 100 yards in the first 2 games combined. But they stopped giving him the ball in those games. Coming into week 3 this year, Dalvin Cook only had 24 attempts. So the difference maker in this game was that they kept trying. Unlike the Bears, they kept trying to feed Dalvin Cook. And even though it wasn't working, right, Dalvin Cook at half, you go into halftime and you would think wholesale offensive game plan change, scrap whatever we had planned, let's go to the passing game. No. They stuck to the game plan. They at least allowed Chicago to play him and think he was going to get the ball, and he did. He got 30 carries overall, and I think that was the key, because the threat of Dalvin Cook is sometimes better than him actually having the ball. The presence he has on the field, just him being out there, when he wasn't there against Atlanta, the threat of Madison is not the same as the threat of Cook, and that's why we got blown out by Atlanta. So you could thank Dalvin Cook's presence alone, even though he didn't get over 100 yards rushing. He created so many opportunities for that offense.
Absolutely. You look at his game numbers again, 30 attempts, 96 yards, 3.2 yards per carry. So that's not a lot. Let's not act like he was effective. He did have that huge run. What was it? 36 yards. That was more than what he had for the game at the time, that gets called back by holding. But then the very next play, Kyle Rudolph catches a 21-yard pass for a first down. So it doesn't really matter. The Bears really committed to stopping the run, really left something to be desired in the passing game tonight for sure. Let's talk about some guys that we were kind of impressed with tonight. I'm going to go Justin Jefferson, 8 receptions, 135 yards, 16.9 yards per carry. Obviously, he has that 56-yard catch, I believe, in the second half that was really a momentum grabber for the Vikings. Also, Cordell Patterson, I mean, these numbers, 12 attempts for 30 yards, 2.5 yards per carry. Like you said, they didn't commit to the runs. You see right there, 12 attempts is not a lot. I know they were using a lot of different personnel, trying to get Ryan Nall, trying to get Pierce and Lamar Miller in there as well. But you have to be impressed with that 104-yard kickoff return to start the second half. Kind of felt like the Bears were getting some momentum there. I know I was up off my couch screaming and yelling for sure. But then the rest of the game, it was kind of hands in the face, being like, what the fuck are we actually doing? So give me a couple guys you were impressed with from this game.
Let's start with defense. I'm going to go with Eric Wilson. I mean, he hadn't been the best defensive player on this team for the last 2 years. He was probably our, lower tier defensive guy. He was kind of our weak link on defense. He really didn't play much over the last couple of years. He was kind of a rotational linebacker. But then Anthony Barr gets hurt early this season, and Eric Wilson has stepped up. He had a huge pass deflection on what I think was third down, a big third down, where there was a guy wide open. I think it was Anthony Miller over the middle, who was ready to catch a drag pattern over the middle. And Eric Wilson really made a nice play on that. He made great plays in the run game. And then on another guy on defense is obviously Harrison Smith. But I don't have to shout Harrison Smith out. This is what he's been doing all year. He's always been our security blanket. And they said a lot on the broadcast how the Vikings were playing a lot of too deep to protect their corners. And they were doing that a lot. But they were also, what was great about Minnesota wasn't that they blitzed a ton, but they showed blitz a ton. And they did blitz a good amount, but they showed blitz on a majority of these plays. And if you're Nick Foles and you see the line of scrimmage and you see Harrison Smith on the edge, or you see Eric Kendricks in the A gap along with Eric Wilson, that is getting in your head right before the snap. And by the time that ball snapped and they go out in coverage, then you have to completely shift your brain into thinking now they're in coverage, nobody's open, and that clock in his head is just going off. And he still only had 3 seconds to throw the ball, even when they didn't blitz. So this team all around, I want to say it was an all around defensive performance for them, but a couple guys like Harrison Smith, Eric Wilson, Eric Kendricks, and even Jeff Gladney stepping up in the run game. Everybody on this defense really stepped up today, and got to give tip my cap to them.
Absolutely. I mean, you point to that sack that Hendricks has to end a drive before halftime. The Bears have to punt, and you come out. We have that 104-yard kickoff return. The Bears come back. They force a punt, and then Harris muffs it. Vikings get the ball right back. Defense comes out, does a good job again. They force a field goal. Bears come out 3 and out. Just flat. Just no momentum at all. This offense has just nothing, it feels like. They just have nobody they can go to when they absolutely have to have a play. It seems like even Robinson is down on his luck at this point. Hats off to the whole Vikings defense for sure. Came into this game, I criticized them a lot on the pregame show for sure. Said that the Bears should not be worried about it. And you know what? They did. They stopped us. And I'm going to also have to shout out Kirk Cousins, 25 for 36, 292 yards, 8.1 yards per attempt, two touchdowns, and 1 interception. Obviously, that interception wasn't even his fault. But, I mean, his first win on Monday Night Football means a lot to him. I also want to give a shout-out to Roquan Smith. He was all over the field tonight. He had a couple tackles on Cook in the backfield. And then he also had a couple sacks. Just unfortunate for this defense, though, because they fought hard. They didn't give up a lot of big plays here, Gabe. This wasn't a matter of, how do I say this, of, the Bears getting gashed. This was just kind of a grinded out game, and Cook was able to make a couple runs there at the end, and then Kirk Cousins made throws when he had to. The play action pass caused fits for this Bears defense all game.
Well, yeah, Andy, last year, the Vikings had only 1 completion over 20 yards down the field, and I think they only had 2 or 3 over 10 yards down the field. So This game looked a lot like that week 4 game. That was the game I was alluding to. That week 4 game last year was the ugliest football game with Chase Daniel starting for Chicago. It was not pretty to watch. The Bears eked out that win. This game was very similar. I agree they didn't get a bunch of big plays, but they got first downs when they needed it, and they chewed the clock. And I liked how they took that approach to the game, because a team like Chicago needs a lot of possessions to get points. They're not going to score. I think they have the least. I mean, this is completely me manufacturing this, but I'm willing to bet they have the least amount of points in the NFL per possession. I would think that's accurate, because they do get a lot of possessions since their defense is always getting them the ball back. But the Vikings didn't give them the ball a ton in this game. Besides those turnovers, their time of possession, 35 minutes, and they got 19 first downs. Sometimes that's all you need to win a game. But Kirk Cousins, I'll give him credit. He made throws. But he has more weapons. It seems like he has more weapons than Nick Foles does at his disposal. And Buster Screen was a guy I also wanted to mention for Chicago. I said on my show last week, I was really looking forward to seeing Justin Jefferson versus Buster Screen in the slot. I also was trashing the Bears on my show, so don't feel I'm not offended by you. But I said Buster Screen, he's statistically the worst slot cornerback in the NFL. On the season coming into this game, he had allowed 35 catches on 45 targets. So this game was no different. That Adam Thielen touchdown to start the game was Buster Screen guarding him in the slot. Then Justin Jefferson, or then Adam Thielen's second touchdown against Buster Screen. So I think the key to this game was picking on mismatches for Minnesota.
Absolutely. They definitely hit on that Buster Screen mismatch all game. I've talked about it on this podcast before, how Buster Screen is the weakest link in this secondary. It's no secret. You look at what Jalen Johnson has been able to do as a rookie, and he's already better than Buster Screen. And I don't mean to talk shit on Buster Screen, because he's a Bear and you root for him, but it's just frustrating when a defense is so strong. You see that weakest link that easily, that the Vikings were able to attack him that easily. It just very frustrating. The Bears now on a 4-game losing streak, going to 5-5. Let's kind of talk about the outlook of the rest of the season for both of these teams, because they are on wildly different tracks currently. So let's start with the Vikings. You now move to 4-5. What are the realistic expectations going for the rest of the year? Is this a wild card team now? Is it wild card or bust?
Well, I think we can only control what we can control. So if we don't make the wild card, it's not, I don't know if that's going to be necessarily an indicator that we haven't had a good season, because I'm looking at our schedule right now, and there's a very good chance we can end the season 9-7, 10-6. And yeah, I want to answer Grant's question first. What's the story behind Zimmer going bananas on the special teams coach? Their special teams has been awful, Grant. They've got 2 punts blocked last week against Detroit, and that was probably just foreshadowing of what was going to come in this game. And last week he didn't have to blow up on his special teams coach, because they won the game pretty easily. But this game, that missed extra point, Austin Cutting missing or having that bad snap, that could have completely screwed them over. But like I said before, I see Tom's comment. Can't spell Austin Cutting without cut. That's good, Tom. That's a good play.
He did not have a good game for sure, but he also was on the COVID list all week.
Yeah,
so probably not a lot of reps. For Cutting for sure.
Yeah, and he's an Air Force guy. You can't cut him after Veterans Day, right after Veterans Day. You got to give that at least like 5 more weeks. But back to their schedule, Minnesota. I love this schedule. They host the Cowboys next week. I love that matchup. Dalvin Cook's going to run wild against them. Mm-hmm. Then they host Teddy Bridgewater. Oh, man. The Vikings pass rush against Teddy Bridgewater. That's going to be good, because Teddy's Teddy's really not that mobile, and I think we could take a big advantage of that. And then we play the Jaguars. Now, if we don't, wow, we're home against the Jaguars too. Geez, three home games in a row. I can't even believe that's a thing in the NFL. All right, so we got 3 home games in a row, and those should all be wins. We'll be 7-4 or 7-5 rather when that concludes, and then we play. Then we have a couple hard ones. We have the Bucks, the Bears, Saints, and Lions. So we'll see. I think if we can win the next 3, we are totally in the hunt.
Unbelievable. John Anthony Grimaldi. Yep, absolutely, Jay Grimm. Check out the Pay the Man podcast, Jay Grimm and Jay Wiz. Why can't Nick Foles throw a football? LMAO. I wish I knew. John, I absolutely wish I knew. He has 0 time in the pocket, and even when he does, he makes terrible decisions. Just does not look like a veteran, does not look like a former Super Bowl MVP. If we're looking at the Bears' outlook for the rest of the year, so 5-5, Sunday Night Football against the Packers next week. That's a loss. I'm going to call that right now. I hate to say it, but it's going to be.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a loss yet. The Packers, they're not playing well. Trust me. I've watched the Packers the last couple of weeks. They look bad. I think the Bears actually have a good chance of that game.
The Packers have not looked well. You know, Matt LaFleur said it himself. They came out flat against the Jaguars this last week, but nothing on this offense tells me that they're going to be able to keep up with the Packers. I know how good this defense has been, but Rodgers always scares me. But also, it would be classic Bears to beat the Packers when it almost doesn't even matter at this point. And they go Lions. They host the Lions the next Sunday. That's a toss-up. I like the Lions offense. You never know what you're going to get defensively from Detroit. They host the Texans. They play the Vikings again, Jaguars, and then end the year with the Packers. So, I mean, realistically, you have to beat the Jaguars and the Texans, but the 4 games, the 4 divisional games are toss-ups. I can't tell you that they're gonna win all 4 of those. I think you're lucky if you go 2-2 in those divisional games and you go 2-0. So 4-2 the rest of the year, and that's absolutely lucky. That's absolutely everything has to go right. We know what's wrong with this offensive line. Does Trubisky start next week? Do we see Tyler Bray start next week? Question here from Thomas Cavetta, who is currently the 2nd best team in the NFC North. I'm going to go with the Vikings, to be honest with you. What they just showed me on this Monday Night Football game was I'm impressed. I mean, I know if you look at their defensive rankings throughout the rest of the season, not great. But if they can win ugly like that, like they just did, like 30 carries for 96 yards or 95 yards, whatever Dalvin just did, and Kirk Cousins can look as good as he just did against defenses that are supposed to be as good as the Bears, or defenses that we thought the Bears, like as good as we thought the Bears are, like why not? Why aren't the Vikings the 2nd best team in this division?
Yeah, I mean, they're battle tested right now. They've played tight games against Seattle. They've gone down to the wire with Green Bay, and they went down to the wire versus Tennessee. Really should have beat the Titans earlier in the year. Gostkowski had 6 field goals in that game, and they won by 1. But the Vikings, they've been battle tested. They played really hard teams this year. Their strengths of schedule through the first half of the season was incredibly difficult, and now they're starting to get that easier patch of their schedule, whereas the Bears are now getting into the harder patch of their schedule. And then you have Detroit, who had a really tough first few weeks of the season, but they're hanging in there through that portion of their schedule. And now I could see the Lions, they don't match up well against like the Vikings per se. But versus the Bears, I mean, if they can hold the Bears to under 20 points, which I mean, what defense can't hold? Right, exactly. So Detroit gets points. They'll find a way to put 20 on the board. I just think the X factor for Chicago is the fact when their defense does make big plays is they turn it into all the offense's points in this game were based on defensive plays, right? And then the special teams.
Yeah.
All of them. They didn't have a single manufactured drive from their own, 25-yard line. in this
No,
game.
no, Gabe, let's talk about it a little bit more. I mean, your Minnesota D shuts down Bears offense in the second half. Before Miller's 7-yard catch with 9:55 left in the fourth quarter, the Bears had -2 yards of total offense in the second half. This is an NFL team. What the fuck is going on? And this is not to get like pissed or yell at anybody, but I know it's the first game of Billy Laser calling plays, but these are still Najee's plays. Maybe that means that Najee doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He came here from Kansas City, wants to run the Kansas City offense. You do not have the players, the athletes to run the Kansas City offense. Have a fucking clue in your brain or some type of something to tell yourself that, hey, what I'm doing is not working. Let's try something different. That is the most frustrating part, is they refuse to change. We've talked about it before, Gabe, that they need to commit to the run. They need to decide what they're doing. If your lead running back, albeit it's Cordell Patterson tonight, has 12 attempts, you're not committing to the run. If Nick Foles, 105 yards passing on 15 completions, that's not working either. So obviously, we got to pick one. Pick your poison here. What was Minnesota able to do defensively that just shut Chicago down?
It was the predictability in play calls. I could tell you every time it was a third down, they weren't going to run the ball. On 3rd and 2, it's a pass play. When you're playing against the Vikings, anything 3rd and 4 and shorter, they can run the ball as well as pass the ball. But with Chicago, you just know what's coming, and it's a pass play. So the Vikings disguised all their coverages. They played games with Nick Foles, and they made him look silly. And back to what you were saying with Cordero Patterson, commit to that man as your running back in this game because he looked good when they gave him the ball. He was getting positive yards. It's taking time off the clock, and that's the kind of game plan that you are alluding to. If you're going to be if you have a great defense, what complements a great defense like butter on toast is a run game. You got to commit to the run game and take the air out of the ball, limit the possessions for Minnesota. Kirk Cousins he had 19 points in this game. He helped them get 19 points because they had so many possessions. If you cut their possessions maybe by 25%, the Vikings aren't putting up more than 14 in this game.
Right. I mean, 296 yards for Kirk Cousins, 96 yards on the ground for Dalvin Cook. So, I mean, it's not like they were completely stopped. First half wasn't great for the Vikings. It's 7-6. We see Akeem Hicks go down with about 2 minutes to go in the third quarter, doesn't return with a hamstring injury. I think that has a lot to do with Cook being able to get loose a little bit in the second half. That presence in the middle was just gone. Cook was not afraid. He was getting a lot of yards in between the hash marks in the second half, and really, that was exactly what the Vikings needed.
Yeah, maybe it's Soldier Field gets torn up midway through the game. It's harder for guys to get footing. I would probably say it was the Akeem Hicks injury. Like you said, he just wasn't afraid. Maybe he definitely looked different, though, in this game. It's when I saw highlights of him against the Bears in week 4 last year. He looked scared. He looked hesitant. And it's games like this where you want him to look his best. He did not look his best. He looked a little hesitant in this game. It's harder to make cuts on Soldier Field, but it's also when there's just nowhere to go, you're going to be a little angry too. But they kept going to him, even when it wasn't working. I could see visible frustration. But the thing is, what the Bears do is they stop running the ball when it doesn't work. They pass it, they throw in completions, and the clock stops. But when you're Minnesota, the clock keeps running. Even on a negative rush, the clock keeps running. And they just grinded out the clock to win this game, leaving the Bears no time to come back.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, you saw the writing on the wall with 55 seconds left. Foles gets the ball back with no timeouts, gets injured a couple plays later. enter Tyler Bray, 1 completion for his career, 4 total snaps before he enters the game. Absolutely no chance, as if there was a chance for the Bears before that. But yeah, I don't really know if there's excuse me. I don't really know if there's much else to say about this game at that point, Gabe, besides good win for the Vikings. For the Bears, what do? You put your head down and move on as this losing streak moves on. This was the biggest game of the year at least for the Vikings. I don't know if you say that for the Bears. I kind of point to the Rams game earlier this year. Obviously, that's a loss, but getting to this point, this is prime time. This is Monday night. Now you get another primetime game. Fuck. Next week, like just have us play at 1:00. I don't want anybody else to watch besides Bears and Packers fans. I don't know what to expect from the rest of this team from this team the rest of the year, Gabe. Yeah, I mean, if you're in the Bears front office, do you just tank at this point for a draft pick? We know the quarterback situation. We know Trubisky's not the guy of the future. Obviously, we know Foles is not the guy of the future. He is just not getting it. I don't think, but also the Bears' problems with the offensive line, the guy's not catching the ball. Is that fixable this season? This kind of seems like something they're just going to have to kind of pack it up and wait for this offseason to kind of do anything about.
I think it goes even bigger than just the draft. I think it goes to a regime change. I think Bill Lazor, Matt Nagy, they got to go. I mean, I hate to say that because I'm not a Bears fan. I don't watch them enough, but based on what I saw is Matt Nagy passed the play calling over to Bill Lazor, and he did worse as the play caller. So if your colleague can't fix it, then and neither of you guys can fix this problem, then you have to go because at this point, the players are probably better off playing without coaches. I think this team could probably win more games if they drew their own plays up. I think Nick Foles could probably play better if he drew his own plays up. It's that bad because, like you said before, is it that they don't see what's going on the field, like what's happening? It's amnesia. It's like you said, it's just close-mindedness. It's ignorance.
Stubbornness.
It's just, yeah. And they act like they know the answer, trying to like a bunch of missionaries. They're like religious missionaries trying to conform their players into adopting their religion, but they don't want to convert. They just want to play how they feel they can play their best. It's just all around. I think you need to get a new priest in the church,
Might be about time. I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate a total just purge of the front office. We saw Steve Cohen just bought the Mets and completely gutted that front office. Somebody want to take the Bears off the McCaskey's hands? I wouldn't hate that. But yeah, man, it's just frustrating. I mean, I'm a Bears fan. I'm also an Illinois Fighting Illini fan. And if you're an Illini fan, you can attest to this. Lovie Smith also refuses to change his ways with his Tampa 2 defensive scheme that does not work at the college level. You do not have the athletes. And we see the Illini get burned in the middle of the field, similar to how we saw the Bears actually get burned today, sitting back in that cover 2. The middle of the field was wide open for Kirk Cousins, but also the Vikings were either putting pressure on the quarterback or they were sitting back in that too high safety, and Foles had no idea what to do with it. And that's what is just so perplexing to me, Gabe, is this guy, this is why we brought him in. This is a Super Bowl MVP, albeit as a backup. Didn't think he was going to be there. That doesn't mean he didn't have that insane stretch he did with Philadelphia. He's familiar with Matt Nagy. He's worked with him in two different teams before. I just don't know what to put the excuse on anymore. If I can call it an excuse, and I hate to call it an excuse, but it's just like, where do you even go at this point? Is this whole season just kind of a disaster? You talk about when was the last team that you remember being 5-1, getting to 5-5, and just being the fans being completely, I don't want to say out on, because not all fans are out on the Bears, but as far as I go, I don't remember a more frustrating team than this one.
No, I think the last team I remember who had a big. I know the Lions when they made the playoffs, they started the year 5-1 and ended only like 10-6. But I think it was also Josh McDaniels when he became the head coach of the Broncos. I remember he blew that year and they started really well, and then he went back to New England. As Tom Scavetta comments, Vikings will more than likely be the best team in football to miss the playoffs this year. Ooh. Yeah, I agree. I think the Bears at this point, that the playoff wagon has left the station. And that's okay. It's a tough year in the NFL this year. And as a Viking fan, honestly, we haven't won a Super Bowl in our franchise's history. I don't want to make this, it's a lame excuse, but I don't want this year to be the year they win the Super Bowl, because I don't want that asterisk next to their title, if you know what I mean. So it's for the Bears. I think even though your team is where you are, we are where we are, we're both not making the playoffs. And it doesn't matter. If you don't make the playoffs, you're equal. You have no chance of winning the Super Bowl. So it doesn't matter how ugly it is. If you're not in the playoffs, it doesn't matter how good you played. So if Minnesota goes on, wins out, and they still don't make the playoffs, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, we'll both be part of the losers club, watching from our couches. Yeah, I think this division is more now clear than ever. The Packers to lose. They now sit at 3 games over the Bears, and I think 4 or maybe 3 as well over the Vikings. We'll be curious to see how the rest of the season goes. Like we said, a lot of divisional games in the NFC North coming up. So going back to this game real quick before we close it out, give me your player of the game, Gabe.
It's a very, very good question. I'm going to go with, if I had to, I would go with Justin Jefferson. I mean, I'm trying not to look at the stats, even though he was the best player statistically. It was the impact he made for their offense. Adam Thielen on many games this year has not showed up. And I know a lot of people out there who have him on their fantasy team are very angry many weeks of this year because there's games where he does little to nothing. But he had 2 touchdowns. That'll help the fantasy. But the one-handed one was dope. Don't get me wrong. But the second one was just an easy one against a buster screen who fell down. But Justin Jefferson does all of the work in between the 20s for this team. So many times this year where Adam Thielen will catch the touchdowns and Justin Jefferson will do all the stuff in between the 20s. Justin Jefferson gets open better than Adam Thielen. He's more versatile than Adam Thielen. He's better in the slot. He's better, honestly, out wide. He went up against, you watch this, Adam Thielen up against Kyle Fuller in this game. He had his catch broken up. Justin Jefferson had a beautiful route against Kyle Fuller. So I just think Justin Jefferson bailed out Kirk Cousins more than Adam Thielen did in this game. And I'd say he was our difference maker offensively. And I knew Justin Jefferson would be the guy to step up because he's been doing it all year.
Right. Actually, I'm gonna shout out my guy, Michael Menard, receivers coach at Eureka College in Eureka, Illinois, right outside of Peoria. He is also a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan. He called in the listener comments on the pregame brew that Justin Jefferson was going to have a big game, and he did. I agree with you, Gabe. He might not have those 2 touchdowns on his resume, but he was there. He made the plays when you need it. You talk about that 53-yard reception, but it wasn't just that. There were multiple second and shorts and third and longs where Kirk Cousins was able to find Jefferson, and he was just more athletic, just made a better play, beat this Bears secondary. And it just really sucks, though, for Buster Screen. I know I harp on him a lot that he is the weakest link in this secondary, but he's the one that gives up the 2 touchdowns to Thielen. If we're going to my player of the game, as much as I hate to fucking do this, dude, Kirk Cousins, Kirky boy, I'm going to give him player of the game. He gets his first win on Monday Night Football. You like that? You like that, Kirk? Congratulations. Of course, it's against my Chicago Bears, but 25 for 36, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns. The interception was not his fault. That says yards YPC, but it means YPA, yards per attempt. But yeah, Kirk, good game. You beat us. That's what I said before the game is force Kirk Cousins to beat us, and I like the Bears' chances. Keep the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands. And it's not even like they did. He throws 36 passes, but Dalvin Cook rushed the ball 30 times. So it was still a pretty good mix. But I would say Kirk Cousins led you guys to this victory, along with an impressive performance from your defense. Your pass rush was great. I thought Eric Kendrick was great. DJ Wanham, the rookie, had a sack. Harrison Smith even got in on the action after, kind of getting to a little chirping match there with Cordell Patterson. The very next play, he gets in on Foles. Congratulations to you, my friend. I was not hoping for this result, but I'm glad you are very humble about it and you are not a dick. Vikings win 19-13 over the Chicago Bears. This is the first ever edition of the postgame brew. The Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings, Monday Night Football, Brew Party postgame show. I'm Andy Hopper. He's Gabe Flaten, the host of the North Pole. Gabe, tell everybody where we can find that incredible show you do for Review and Preview Sports.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. First of all, Andy, always love talking to you. So for my show, The North Pole, it's on Tuesday nights. I'm going to be hosting
it. I'm sorry, Grant's right. Bears Super Bowl DVD starts with this game.
That's great. I love that.
Go on. I'm sorry.
So every Tuesday night, 6 to 7 p.m. on Facebook Live, Review and Preview Sports. Yep. And then on YouTube, you can find it also at the same name after the show, Spotify, all that good stuff. And tomorrow, I'm going to be bringing on actually a special guest. He's from the NFC North Report Instagram page. He's the host of it. It's a really popular probably the most popular NFC North Instagram page. And then Andy Hopper will also be on afterwards to break down this game. We'll have a lot more info in depth and a good night to sleep on it for sure.
More statistical analysis. This is more just from the gut, instant reactions here after, kind of watching. I got all of my notes here, my guest checkbooks for all of my server and bartenders out there. I'm not working currently due to the shutdown in Illinois, so might as well put my guest checkbook to work there for notes. Gabe, thank you so much for joining me, man. This is a great time. I always love talking to you. Always love your perspective on sports. The Vikings get it done, folks, 19-13 over the Chicago Bears. One more listener comment. Good stuff, fellas. Great work as always, Andy. Thomas, you're the man, the leader of Review and Preview Sports. Thomas Scavetta, New York Giants fan. Are the New York Giants the best 3-7 team in the NFL? I think so. Gabe, you're out there in New York. Check out Big Blue Avenue. Everything that Review and Preview Sports. Tomorrow, the North Pole. What time does that start tomorrow, Gabe? 6 p.m.
6
Eastern?
6 p.m. Eastern time, yeah.
6 p.m. Eastern. I will be on about 6:45?
Yeah,
6:40 Eastern.
Second half of the show.
Second half of the show. Let's hope the second half of the show is better than the Bears' second half of Monday Night Football. 5-5. The Vikings move up to 4-5. The NFC North is getting pretty interesting, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the post-game brew from the Brew Party podcast. I'm Andy Hopper. He's Gabe Flaten, the host of the North Pole. Thank you so much for being here. Bear down. Gabe says skull. I'm not going to do the dumb clap. He might, but thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.